I had barely finished my sentence when the first chuckle echoed from the back of the room. I paused just for a second, long enough to catch the smirk on one executive's face, long enough to feel the sting creep into my cheeks. "Could you repeat that, please?" the woman from the tech division asked, voice coated in false sweetness. "It's just your pronunciation threw me off." A few more laughed, polite and sharp, like knives hidden behind napkins. I stood there, holding my notes like armor, my accent suddenly heavier, louder, as if it no longer belonged to me. I had rehearsed this presentation 100 times. I knew every statistic, every market fluctuation, every competitor's blind spot. But now, all they could hear was the way I said strategy with a softer R, the way data rolled too gently from my tongue. My throat tightened. I looked around the conference table, room full of suits, eyes like cold glass, waiting for me to trip again. And in that blur of embarrassment, I wondered if I'd made a mistake trying to belong here. Maybe I was the outsider they saw, just a translator's daughter who thought she could speak business in a borrowed language. I swallowed hard and forced myself to continue, but the words felt foreign in my own mouth now. And then, from the head of the table, he stood, his chair scraped back slowly. No announcement, no warning. Just the CEO, rising as if pulled by something invisible. His eyes weren't on the numbers. They were on me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Just the calm firmness of his presence made the room go quiet. The same people who were laughing seconds ago now shifted in their seats, pretending they hadn't. He looked around slowly, hands in his pockets, and then said, "Funny. I didn't realize we were mocking intelligence today." The silence thickened. I stared at him, stunned. He turned to me, and for the first time since I'd entered that conference room, I saw warmth in someone's eyes. "Continue," he said gently, "or would you like me to take over and explain in all 10 languages you speak?" My heart nearly stopped. The room blinked. 10. A murmur rippled through the air. Confusion, disbelief. I stood frozen, unsure if I should be flattered or run. "She's not just fluent," he added, turning back to the others. "She's formally certified in 10 languages, one of which you probably couldn't pronounce if your promotion depended on it." A nervous chuckle. No one dared laugh now. The woman from tech shifted uncomfortably in her seat. He gestured toward my notes. This strategy was her idea. The data? She compiled it by cross-referencing trends in 5 regional dialects. You want to be impressed? Start there. The tension dissolved like fog under the sun. I breathed for the first time in minutes. He didn't just defend me. He named what they tried to diminish. I wasn't the girl with the accent anymore. I was the woman they had underestimated, and he made sure they knew it. I looked back down at my notes, but my hands weren't shaking anymore. My voice, when it returned, was clear, not louder, not sharper, but steadier. I walked them through the proposal again, this time letting every word fall the way it naturally would from my mouth, not the one they wanted me to wear. I didn't rush, didn't fumble. I let the rhythm of my voice carry the data, the vision, the logic. And as I spoke, something unexpected happened. They started taking notes. The same people who dismissed me minutes ago now leaned forward, nodding, absorbing. My accent hadn't changed, but their perception had, because someone with power decided not to be quiet. When I finished, the CEO nodded once, as if to say, "I told you so." Then he added, "Board approval is already under review, but if anyone has questions, I suggest you ask them respectfully." He didn't smile, but his tone left no room for challenge. I sat down, my seat now a place of quiet triumph instead of dread. He didn't even look at me after that, not immediately. He just opened his tablet like any other day, like defending me hadn't been extraordinary. But to me it was, because I knew how rare that kind of moment was, when someone doesn't just hear your voice, but fights for it to be heard. And in that room full of polished confidence, it wasn't the accents that mattered. It was the truth behind the words, and mine had finally landed. The next day, Whispers followed me through the office like shadows stretching in late light. She speaks 10 languages. I heard she translated policy briefs for the UN once. Was she really a linguist before this? My inbox had triple the usual messages, some congratulatory, others passive-aggressively curious, but none of them felt as heavy as the silence that used to cling to my steps. Now people really looked when I passed. They asked for my input in meetings, scheduled coffee chats, to pick my brain. It was surreal, but beneath the compliments and sudden interest, I sensed something else, the uncomfortable truth that I had never changed, only their awareness of who I'd been all along. I was still the same woman who spoke softly and chose her words with care. But now they listened because the CEO had drawn a line they couldn't cross. And that changed everything. That afternoon I passed his office. The door was slightly ajar. He sat inside, tie loosened, flipping through documents. I hesitated, then knocked. He looked up, surprised, but smiled. "You're not here to correct my Korean grammar again, are you?" I laughed softly. "Only if you keep butchering vowel harmony." He gestured for me to enter. And just like that, we slipped into conversation. Not as CEO and subordinate, but as two people who had quietly seen each other in a crowd full of noise. I didn't know what we were yet. But I knew this. He saw me before anyone else dared to. And that was something I couldn't ignore. Inside his office, the atmosphere was nothing like the intimidating presence he carried in meetings. Here, he was relaxed, sleeves rolled up, a faint scent of espresso lingering in the air. I sat across from him, unsure if I was supposed to thank him or just pretend like none of it had happened. "About yesterday," I began, but he raised a hand gently. "Don't," he said. "You don't owe me anything. They were wrong, and I wasn't going to let that stand. That's all." I nodded slowly, but the words had left a dent in me. Not the insult, but the fact that he didn't hesitate to stand up when others stayed seated. "You didn't have to say what you said," I murmured, "but I'm glad you did." He looked at me then, not just politely but deeply, like he was trying to map the origin of all my quiet resilience. "They think the way you speak defines your intelligence," he said, voice lower, "but the way you listen, that's what sets you apart." That caught me off guard, not because of the compliment, but because someone had finally noticed the part of me that didn't shout. The room fell into a soft silence. No tension, no forced formality. Just quiet understanding hanging between us like music no one dared interrupt. He glanced back at his screen, but didn't return to typing. "You still haven't told me your 10th language," he added casually. I smiled. Maybe I'm saving it for the right moment. He grinned. "Then I'll wait." In the days that followed, something shifted, not just in the way others treated me, but in the way I carried myself. I wasn't suddenly louder or bolder, but there was a steadiness in my posture, a quiet pride in my gait. I stopped shrinking my voice to fit into rooms too small for it. I took up space, not aggressively, but truthfully. Every time I passed the CEO in the hallway, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a spark that said, "I see you." But we didn't speak about it. Not yet. There were always people around, always meetings, always reasons to stay within the lines. Still, our silences were filled with something more than words. One evening, after everyone had left, I stayed late working on a policy draft. I heard his door open, then footsteps approaching. "Still here?" he asked, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Chamomile," he added. I remembered you don't drink coffee after 6. I blinked. He remembered. That detail, small and unspoken, warmed something deep inside me. He handed me the cup and leaned casually against the edge of my desk. "You've been quiet lately," he said. I tilted my head. "Isn't that what they mocked me for?" He smiled softly. They mocked what they didn't understand. We sipped in silence, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood, because someone, at least one person, had chosen to see past the sound of my voice and into the meaning behind it. And maybe, just maybe, That was the beginning of something neither of us had words for yet. The conference in Busan was scheduled just a week later, and to my surprise, he personally requested that I join the leadership panel. "You'll represent our team on multilingual integration," he said, handing me the itinerary as if it were obvious. I blinked. "You want me on stage?" He nodded. "They need to hear your voice and your story." My hands tightened slightly around the paper. I wasn't afraid of speaking. I was afraid of being reduced again. But this time, the fear didn't paralyze me. It sharpened me. On the day of the event, I stood backstage in a simple navy dress, hair pulled back, notes neatly folded in my palm. Through the curtains, I could already hear the low hum of international attendees, the click of earpieces and translators adjusting their devices. When my name was announced, I stepped into the light, not trembling, not hiding. I saw him in the audience, seated near the front, arms crossed, a soft smile breaking through his usual reserve. I took a breath and began. I spoke in fluent English, then shifted gracefully to Mandarin, then French. A few gasps rippled through the crowd and heads turned. Then I paused, looked toward the panel, and delivered the core of our strategy in Korean, slow and measured. The entire room leaned in. I wasn't just a speaker. I was a bridge. And when I finished, applause erupted. Not polite, but real. When I stepped off stage, my heart was pounding. I hadn't just spoken. I had owned the space they once tried to shrink me into. Backstage, I was greeted with a flurry of handshakes and congratulations, some in Korean, others in accented English, a few even in hesitant French. But one voice cut through the rest. "That was extraordinary," he said, appearing just as I turned toward the dressing area. The CEO wasn't smiling with corporate politeness. His eyes were bright, almost proud. "I've been to these panels for years," he added, "but I've never seen them this focused. You didn't just speak. You commanded." I looked at him, trying to read between his words. Was this still about the strategy? Or had it become something more? It felt different, I confessed. Like I wasn't just translating. I was defining something. He nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I saved this from earlier." It was a small pin, our company's emblem, edged in gold. "Traditionally, only board members wear it," he said. "But after today, I think you've earned it." My breath caught. It wasn't just a gesture. It was recognition. I pinned it on carefully, my fingers trembling slightly. As I looked up, he was already watching me, not with admiration, but something more complex. A mix of respect, affection, and hesitation. "You know," he said quietly, "when I said you speak 10 languages, I think I underestimated." I tilted my head, unsure what he meant. "Your silence," he added. "It speaks the loudest of all." My chest tightened, because in that moment, I knew he wasn't just talking about work. He saw the parts of me that had never made it into the reports, and chose them anyway. That evening, long after the conference had ended and the buzz died down, I found myself outside the hotel on a quiet balcony overlooking the sea. The wind was cool against my skin, carrying whispers of waves and distant music. I thought I was alone until I heard his footsteps behind me. "Did you escape the after-party too?" he asked, his voice softer in the night air. I nodded, eyes fixed on the water. Too many people asking about the multilingual girl, like I'm a brand now. He chuckled lightly. "You're more than that." I turned to face him. "Why did you really say it? At the first conference, that I speak 10 languages. You didn't even know back then." He leaned on the railing beside me, his gaze serious now. "Because I knew what they were trying to do. Diminish you. And I wasn't going to let that happen, even if I had to exaggerate to make them stop." I laughed, a quiet, grateful laugh. "So it was a bluff?" He smiled. "A lucky one. But now, I think even 10 languages don't cover everything you carry." There was a pause, the kind that hums with unspoken thoughts. Then he added, "Do you ever feel like words aren't enough?" I looked at him carefully. only when it matters the most. He turned fully to me. Then maybe silence is a language too. One only the right person understands. My heart skipped, but I didn't speak. I just nodded because in that moment we were fluent in something neither of us had been taught, something that felt dangerously close to love. The next morning, the world returned to its usual rhythm, but I didn't. I walked into the office with the pins still on my blouse, my steps no longer tentative. There were smiles from people who had once overlooked me, subtle nods from those who finally realized I wasn't just the quiet one with the accent. But even in this new light, there was something else blooming, something I hadn't fully named yet. Every interaction with the CEO carried an undercurrent now, like a string tied gently between us, tugging closer with every glance. That afternoon, a bouquet arrived at my desk. Not extravagant, just simple white lilies and soft blue hydrangeas. There was no card, just a slip of paper with one word: fluency. I knew it was from him. No one else understood how much that word meant to me. Not as a linguistic term, but as a kind of freedom. I tucked the note into my notebook, heart fluttering. But reality wasn't far behind. As I left the office, I overheard two executives whispering near the elevator. "She's rising fast. You think it's just because of her credentials? Or because of him?" The word stung, but not with surprise. I had expected this. Still, it hurt to know some would always reduce me to someone else's shadow. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, turning the pin over in my hand. Could I survive the scrutiny? The gossip? Was I willing to risk it, not just my position, but my heart? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew I couldn't unknow how it felt to finally be seen. 2 days later, we had a company dinner, one of those formal events where hierarchy and reputation hovered over every conversation. I arrived early, trying to stay invisible among the sea of tailored suits and practiced smiles. But the moment he walked in, conversations shifted. His eyes scanned the room, then found me. Without hesitation, he walked over and offered his arm. "Walk with me," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Whispers rippled around us like static. I felt the heat of stares on my back as we walked to the center table, where he pulled out a chair for me. Not for his assistant, not for a guest, for me. We spoke little during dinner, but every time our eyes met, something passed between us that words would have ruined. Until she arrived, his mother, dressed impeccably, expression as cold as the silverware. She sat across from me and said nothing for a while, just observed. Then, with a calculated smile, she leaned in and asked, "And how many words do you need to know before you learn your place?" The table fell silent. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't flinch. I opened my mouth to speak, but he beat me to it. He stood up, calmly but firmly, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She knows 10 languages, but none of them include shame." The silence was deeper this time. His mother blinked. He added, "And for the record, that's the woman I trust, more than anyone else in this room." The weight of his words landed like thunder. No one at the table moved. His mother's smile tightened, but she said nothing. Her silence wasn't surrender, but retreat. I sat frozen, unsure whether to be grateful, embarrassed, or afraid of what might come next. He slowly returned to his seat, eyes locked with mine for a moment longer before looking down, as if he, too, was trying to catch his breath. My fingers trembled under the tablecloth, clutching the linen napkin as if it could steady me. He had defended me, publicly against his own family. The room resumed its polite rhythm, but nothing felt the same. Later, as guests began filtering out, I found myself in the hallway outside the ballroom, pressing my back against the cool wall, heart still racing. He appeared moments later. "I didn't mean to cause a scene," he said gently. I looked at him. "You didn't cause a scene. You caused clarity." He laughed softly, then stepped closer. "I'm tired of watching people misunderstand you. Or me." I swallowed. "They won't stop." I don't care. His voice was firmer now. Let them talk. Let them speculate. I won't let anyone rewrite what I already know about you. There was a pause, thick with emotion. Then he said something softer. When you speak, you don't just communicate. You heal. You change rooms. You changed me. I didn't realize I was crying until he reached up and gently wiped the tear from my cheek. His hand lingered. So did the feeling that nothing after this moment would ever be the same. The next week, everything changed, yet nothing was said aloud. At work, we were still colleagues. In meetings, we sat apart. During presentations, our eyes met only briefly. But underneath the surface, a current pulled us closer with every passing day. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, steady, inevitable. Then came the International Summit. I was invited as a featured speaker, a promotion few expected, but no one could deny after the last conference. The night before my speech, I received a small envelope at my hotel door. No note, just a folded silk handkerchief and the pin he had given me months ago, now engraved on the back. Speak as yourself. My hands trembled holding it. He hadn't come to the summit officially, but I knew he was there, somewhere in the crowd. On stage, I felt the nerves rise, but also the memory of everything I'd overcome. The whispers, the mockery, the silences. So I stood tall and began, not with charts or buzzwords, but with my story. I spoke in my accent. I let my voice shake when it needed to. I didn't hide anymore. And when I looked into the audience, halfway through, he was there. No suit, just his gaze, steady and full of something unspoken. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. But all I heard was the sound of my heart as he slowly made his way through the crowd, stopping only when he stood right in front of me. And then, without a word, he bowed, deeply, fully, before everyone. The entire hall fell into stunned silence. Cameras clicked, murmurs stirred, but he didn't waver, his head still bowed, like he was honoring something sacred. I froze, unsure whether to cry, to pull him up, or to bow in return. Slowly he straightened and looked at me with eyes that no longer held hesitation. You taught me something no boardroom ever could, he said, voice steady. That leadership isn't about who speaks loudest. It's about who dares to speak with their whole truth. I'd barely managed a whisper. You knew they'd judge you. He nodded. I knew they'd judge us, but I also knew you were worth it. Somewhere behind us, someone gasped. A ripple of disbelief swept through the crowd, not because of what he said, but because of what he did next. He reached for my hand, firm, unshaking, and intertwined his fingers with mine. There, on that international stage, beneath banners and lights and a sea of witnesses, he didn't just acknowledge me. He chose me, not in private, not behind doors, but in front of the very world that had once laughed at my voice. Let them talk, he said softly, so only I could hear. I want to be understood in just one language, yours. I blinked back tears. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking in the spotlight. I was standing tall, because someone I respected most had shown the world I mattered. Not as a project, not as a story, but as his equal, his choice. That night, after the summit, we walked through the quiet streets of the city, no cameras, no suits, no shadows of expectations. Just us. I had taken off my heels, carrying them in one hand, the pin still fastened over my heart. He held my other hand, like it was the most natural thing in the world. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Every step we took felt like rewriting a story I thought I already knew. One where I was always the girl with the accent, the outsider trying to fit in. But now, I was just me, fully, freely. And he wasn't the distant CEO anymore. He was the man who had seen me, really seen me, before the world decided I was worth looking at. We paused at a quiet plaza lit by lanterns, and he turned to face me. You know, he said with a crooked smile, you still owe me a lesson. I raised an eyebrow. In what? He leaned in, eyes playful. In the 10th language. I laughed, surprised. There is no 10th language. He touched my cheek gently. Then I'll invent one. Just for us. My heart swelled, not from romance alone, but from the weight of being chosen, respected, and loved without translation. And as the lanterns flickered above us, I realized this wasn't just a love story. It was a reclamation, a voice, of identity, of belonging. And you, have you ever been made to feel small, only to discover you were never the one who needed to change?